Better late than never, right? Not that late. Anyway, everybody wanted me to make a video regarding testing on the new 3.0 firmware for the Fujifilm X-T2. I do not have an X-T20. However, a few buddies of mine do. Also, on the GFX. GFX didn't really get anything other than EVF plus LCD, which was a feature added in the last firmware for the Fujifilm X-T2. Anyway, in the 3.0 firmware, first thing I wanted to confirm, which is most important according to everybody else, and I knew it would be, is I've tested Nissan, which is a third-party Speedlight wireless and HSS functionality, whether it broke that functionality with Nissan or the Godox unit, which is the 685, along with the X1 transmitter, whether it broke TTL or wireless radio HSS functionality, and the answer is no. They have full functionality as they did before. I also have two X-T2s, which made it wonderfully easy to test. Pre-firmware update and post-firmware update. I knew while Fujifilm had specifically stated that continuous autofocus, and they did state specifically continuous autofocus, would be twice as fast, they were speaking in the same parlance that others speak of when they say up to something something. One thing that I actually emphasize over and over again that the other YouTube photography channels don't seem to get is that when we talk about autofocus speed, we are talking not merely about the camera. The fastest autofocus camera in the world cannot drive a slow autofocus lens any faster. That's the limitations of the type of motor drive mechanism as relates to that lens. Now, this is true not only of Canon, also of Nikon, but also of Fuji. Fujifilm has linear motors, which are really fast, like Fuji's 90mm is quad linear motors, and there are stepper motors on many of Fujifilm's slower lenses. So as far as us continuous autofocusing being twice as fast, that's not the case. However, I did test, since I own every Fujifilm X series lens except for the 18mm. By the way, the 27mm pancake's as slow as it ever was. However, in single point and zone, the autofocus is improved where it's actually not jumping, even on the insanely slow 27mm Fujifilm pancake lens. There is no improvement, as I tested, on wide tracking. There is in single point, and there is specifically so in zone. The serious difference in testing, since I have a couple X-T2s, I only updated the firmware on one, is that continuous autofocus in zone, most especially, but also in single, but specifically in zone on Fujifilm's newer lenses with linear motors like the 90mm, the 16 to 55, and the 50 to 140. When you're in the zone autofocus, and also single, but like I said, most specifically in zone, focusing between near and far, instead of actually jumping and hunting, all things being equal, instead identical between both cameras, it is instantaneous rollover. I actually like to call it rollover autofocus. Some people call it other things, where you can actually go between focus between near and far subject, instead of when you actually drop the autofocus point in continuous autofocus to the next relational object, you notice that the lens will jump autofocus after you've dropped it on that point. Whereas on the Fujifilm now, from before, you actually didn't notice you're waiting for it to change autofocus when actually it's already changed, because in shifting over, it's actually scrolling over in autofocus to that, where when you land on it, you're already there, and that was palpable. I don't know if you're familiar with that word. It's an interesting term everybody should have. Palpable, kind of like palpating a tumor, like you could feel a tumor or something, means it is very, very apparent. In other words, it smacks you in the face, in short. So that's the first thing I definitely noticed, and I was quite shocked by that. Like I said, there is no serious improvement in wide tracking. However, definitely so in single, but most specifically so in zone autofocus, and this improvement is in continuous autofocus, but specifically as relates to the linear motors. Like the 80mm macro is a hybrid autofocus, and it is about to come out here in a few days. It is not only linear motors, but it actually employs rolling ceramic balls on rails. I think I call it a ceramic roller mech. It's a type of hybrid mech, which is basically a linear linear motors, electromagnetic motors on rails, but to keep the plane of the focusing elements perfectly flat, which is really important because in a macro lens, f5.6 still has an insanely thin narrow depth of field, keeping the image plane, keeping the element plane perfectly parallel to fore and aft elements is very important, and so an interesting autofocus hybrid system is present in the 80mm macro when it drops. Well, it's actually the 80mm is already dropped. It basically just hasn't reached the United States yet. So we also have, in addition to that, separate RGB histograms. One is only if you assign a function button. I do not have a function button assigned to that, so I had to assign one of my function buttons to histogram. When you're actually viewing, you could actually hit the function button. You could actually see overexposure, blinking specular highlights, and you can also see RGB histogram. The secondary aspect of the histogram introduction in 3.0 firmware is when doing a review playback, like I'll do here. I'll press an image, and I have RGB as well as highlight specular blinking. And review playback, what I'll have to do is press the up arrow to go to that as I'm reviewing the details for the image. We have addition, of course, a PC connection mode for using Fujifilm's newest software. As I already mentioned, there's absolutely no breakage on third-party flash capability. Wireless, TTL, or HSS. I've confirmed that now with the Nissan and the Godox, so everything's hunky-dory there. And that's it. So that's what people wanted me to report, and I have done a lot of testing. Actually, every time there's a new firmware out, especially a major one, which we all herald Fujifilm for, I have to end up doing a lot of testing. I do so much testing sometimes, it kind of wears me down. I do a lot of testing. But anyway, that's the answer to your question, and everybody had been, beating me over the head for this video. At least a lot of people have anyway. So that is the answer. Everything is cool, copacetic, and hunky-dory, and happy, pina colada, and spandex bikinis on the beach. Good times for Fujifilm's latest firmware update. If you like this video, just click the link below. I'm not a shill. I just like giving out information and being helpful and being a source of information. So, and happy holidays. If you celebrate them, if you don't, that's fine. I really don't celebrate the holidays. Yeah, happy holidays, all that stuff. Oh my God, I forgot to put my fireplace on. Oh damn, I'll do it for the next video. For some reason, everybody loves the virtual fireplace on my computer monitor. I have no idea why. Maybe it gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling in a deep place, somewhere below the belt. I don't know. Thanks for watching. Bye.